To what country do you go if you want to see strange things? Well, actually the answer to that is Japan, but it's a bit far. So I'm going to the next best thing, Belgium. And we have already seen the T-13. This is another example of something you can only see at the Royal Military Museum in Brussels. And it is the answer to the question, what do you do if you have a lot of infantry, a lot of Lloyd carriers, but not much infantry support? And so the Belgians had to think about this in the 1950s when they were given a whole bunch of Lloyd carriers, and they came up with this. It is the CATI 90, Canon d'Anti-Tank Infantry, which I find it interesting to actually say anti-tank and not anti-char, but there you go. And of course 90, I think in Belgian it's non instead of 90, but again, it's Belgians, what can you say? So anyway, what you did is you started with your Lloyd carrier and you put a 90mm gun on it. Now here's of course the obvious problem, is that a Lloyd carrier is not a large vehicle to be going around with a 90mm gun. And well, the answer to that is also Belgian. MECAR, Mécanique et Armament, is the manufacturer of the MECAR 90mm gun, and this was the first installation of that gun onto a vehicle. So that said, let's start wandering around and having a look at another of the uniqueness that the Belgians have come up with. So being a Lloyd carrier, what they basically had to do was just stick a hole in the front for the cannon to poke through, but most of the rest of it is original Lloyd. You can see the drive shaft comes forward, goes into a differential which is protected basically by a U, or an angled U of armor, and then goes out to the brakes and final drives on the side. It's got stowage bins left and right. Your headlight guards cover your traditional array of your luxury accoutrements, such as your service headlight, convoy marker light, low visibility light, and these look like indicators actually, but they got to be marker lights of some sort surely. And of course on the far side you have a horn. Symbols on the front, well, this is a divisional badge. The Belgians had 2 divisions in Germany, that's one of them. And on the other side, the 715 is the code for the infantry school. So apparently 720 would have been the armor school. And as this was an infantry support vehicle, well, the infantry guys got to play with it. Otherwise, you can see that the armor is sloped. I mean, we're talking barely 5mm. It's barely enough to stop shrapnel or other light fragmentation. I'm not sure I'd even put up against a 762 if it wouldn't go through this. I could be surprised. And well, that's pretty much it. I mean, you can see the really small track pitch at the front for the track links, which is your typical British carrier type. And well, then you get around to the side. All right, so coming around the side, by the way, I forgot to mention the 5-ton weight classification marking on the front, which lets you know this thing weighs about 5 ton. Actually, officially it's about 4.8 loaded. But you'll get to your traditional carrier type suspension at this point. And you can see it's 2 bogies. So remember, the universal carrier is a bit shorter. It had 3 wheels per side. Each bogie has a main pivot point, which is unsprung, and then you have actual springs on the bogie wheels which force against each other. On each side of the wheel which is sprung, you're going to have 4 quill springs. So you've got 2 on the front of this divider and 2 on the back. One is inside the other. And so they'll work against each other and then pivot round with a return roller on top. As you can see, they're the traditional carrier, very thin wheels. So you have the track wheel guides, 1 on each side, so it's not a center guide as you would have on a modern vehicle. Now, we've been having a look at the pins, and it's a little bit weird because it turns out these things come in segments. So every X many pins, you're going to see that instead of having a hammered rivet to hold the pin in, it's a retaining ring with a cotter pin. So yeah, if you wanted to break the track, you would replace a section. So you pull the retaining ring off here, knock out the pin, and you would do it again a bit further down, knock it out, and replace that one segment. But what I'm looking at as we're here is that the amount of links between each one of these retaining pins isn't the same. So it's like 19, 19, and then it's 26, or 22, or something weird like that. So we're trying to have a think about this, and what we're wondering is because this is an old vehicle, if the tracks haven't stretched a little bit. So what you'll do is you'll break off a track, you'll torch off a pin or a link, and then you would insert the retaining clip link on the shorter track segment and put it back together. And I'm sure somebody who owns one of these things will put a comment on the bottom and say, hey, no, that's actually not why it's really there. But we can't think of another reason why you would have different lengths of track segment on each side of the track. But of course, just because I can't think of anything doesn't mean there isn't a very logical idea. I will be curious to read your comments. So the other thing you have on the side here is side panels that hinge down, giving you lovely access to the seat, and you can actually see the 90mm gun easily enough. The gun is being mounted on a simple pedestal mount. You can see here they bolted in between the driver and co-driver's positions. The thing weighs in about 270 kilos, got a 4 decimeter recoil stroke, but you haven't heard that one used in a while. And the overall pressure was still officially low, but combined with still too much for the carrier to take, which is why this had such a short service life. In terms of ammunition, we had two main types. You had heat and high explosive. There was a smoke round, I'm not sure if the Belgians used it. Heat would fire at about 630 meters a second and HE at about 350, which gave you an effective range of about 1 kilometer with heat round, which doesn't sound like much, but if you're otherwise unsupported infantry, I think you'll take whatever you can get. You officially had a range of a better part of 4 kilometers with high explosive, but hey, you're talking area targets and they're probably not moving very fast either. So anyway, we'll come back to the inside in a little bit and have a quick look at the back. Actually, I just caught this. They have a second retaining latch, just like this further down, to hold the side plate in position so you could drive around with the side plate down. All right, when you get to the back, you'll notice a couple of things. First, I can stand up under the wing of a Canuck aircraft, CF-100. I don't know very much about the thing, it flies, whatever. And you can fit a Chieftain or a CATI 90 under it. If you look at the back of the CATI 90, well, starting off at the left-hand side, your reflector, your basic collection of service taillight, combo marker light, and low-vis taillight. Track tension, of course, have to mention it. You have little holes in the back, you screw for the tension that's done there. The towing pintle is on a basic leaf spring. The battery is got a position here on the left. 2 fuel tanks, one on each side. And well, then you get in and we start talking about the engine. So the hood, or bonnet, I guess, since it is a Lloyd carrier, is held in place by a couple of little spring releases here. And we can lift it up. Still room under the Canuck. I gotta love how wonderfully simple World War II era vehicles were. I mean, you look at it and you understand how the thing works. So what we have is a Ford water-cooled, with radiator, coolant, so on, V8, cranks out about 85 horsepower. And you're looking, okay, well look, there's your air filters directly on top of the carb. You follow the fuel line, it comes back to here, and oh look, there's 2 in, 1 out. That's obviously for your fuel selector, because you got 2 tanks. So you select one fuel tank or you select the other fuel tank. Oh look, your spark plug cables go to your distributor. You got the belt running the fan. I mean, it's really simple. Oh, hang on. See, there's a dipstick down here. Let's have a gander. Do we have oil? Oh, oh crap. All right. Yes, we have oil. Fortunately, we also have a drip mat underneath. So I'm pretty sure this is an operating vehicle. I think somebody mentioned it earlier. They could, if they wished, drive it. But there you go. American V8. What more do you want in your armored vehicle? Okay, inside, lots of room, at least without lots of ammunition taking up the space, but it's a 4-man crew. I'm obviously seated more or less where the gunner is. And as I'm looking at it, the breech block is marked CATI 90, number 65, which is a little odd because usually you would think the breech block would be marked just by the gun name, MECAR 90 or what have you, but no, it said they named it after the vehicle that it's installed on. Vertically sliding breech block, as you can imagine, the rounds being only 9 centimeters, are reasonably small. For traverse and elevation, you can see there's a geared system here for elevation. Traverse is a little old school, and you can see we have a shoulder pad here. So as near as I can tell, you're on your knees, or at least one knee, reaching forward into the sight. You undog a locking lever, and then you would aim with the wheel in elevation, and then side to side, it's up to 22 degrees of traverse to each side, 15 in elevation, 13 in depression. So I kind of thought these things went away with Crusader, but apparently not. The sight itself has two graduations. It's got a choke sight for ranging, or a funnel sight, some people will know it. And it's graduated for the heat rounds, it looks like on the side where you might need more lead, and the high explosive round is all the way right down the middle. So I'm looking at it, the heat round is at 1200 meters, is where the HE round is at 800. So the idea behind a funnel sight or a choke sight is that you just continue to elevate until the two lines touch the sides of whatever it is that you're shooting at. So usually it's a frontal tank, for example. And once that's done, well, you have the correct super elevation to engage your target at the correct range. For some reason, not many vehicles use it anymore. The Bradley does, or at least did back in my day. I don't know about the A3s. The M1 does not. It has a steadiometric sight that actually goes sideways, remember the range, and then you apply it to the sight picture. But it's a very simple sight otherwise. And yeah, you want to be low in order to move it around. But as I say, that is the gunner's position, loader's on the far side, and then we have the two drivers. I'm not going to bother with the left-hand side driver. I am going to see about squeezing in to the right. But the driver on the left, he has pretty much identical controls. Two steering brake tillers, a clutch, accelerator, and well, that's it, no gauges. Okay, so the driver's position. As on the side, there's apparently some debate as to whether or not the co-driver's position was actually filled when the vehicle was fielded, or if we just kept spare. But no matter. So your brakes and steering tillers are in the middle. Accelerator is a big pedal you can't miss. The clutch is a big pedal you can't miss. And the gear shift is a little bit annoying. It's kind of behind you a little bit, and they place it directly under the gun because that way the co-driver can also reach the gear shift. But it's awkward, to say the least, to actually get to it. And of course you also have to worry about, if the gun is traversing left, he's going to shove into you and push you to the right. The seat will elevate. This particular one is seized in place, but you can see the one on the co-driver side is in the upper position. Since I'm already looking out over the top, you should see me in an Alpha 4C or Dodge Viper or even a Miata a little bit. It's kind of like this is how I usually drive, this head above the windshield, which is okay for driving a car when you're in combat and people are shooting at you. Your head being up is a little bit annoying. So you'd have to get down, but there's no way of driving this vehicle without, well, sticking your head up, I'm afraid to say. But then again, this is an infantry support gun, and the infantry don't get very much armor of their own, so who are you to be complaining? I have 3 millimeters of cotton protection, whoop-dee. Okay, other things. So the gauges are simple enough. I see an electrical for amperage. I see an oil pressure gauge, light switch, starter motor, and that's it. There's no fuel gauge. Maybe there may have been a speedometer somewhere. Oh, there it is. It's hidden at the front here. And yeah, there's stowage, and you're good. I mean, it's a carrier. Oh, quick note on steering. So again, if you recall, on the universal carriers, I had a steering wheel, and the reason for that was you had a track warping system for shallow turns. Well, obviously not so on the Lloyd carrier. This is a traditional. You slow one track down in order to turn. There's none of that bogies shifting left to right in order to warp the track business here. Nobody's entirely sure quite how many of these things were made, but 32 seems to be a reasonable guess. They would also have been paired with ammunition carriers as well. So you were talking basically the program was, let's say, 64 vehicles. Now again, it didn't last incredibly long in service, maybe about a decade. They were replaced by the Jagdpanzer Kanons. The Belgians had their own slightly different version with a proper high pressure 90mm gun. Hooray! The CATI 90s were disassembled in effect, and the MECAR guns were eventually added onto FN armoured cars for gendarmerie service. Which means that, yes again, this is the one and only which survives. So I hope you found the video interesting and informative, and from the World Museum in Brussels, take care.